Oh, welcome to World History. These are the class expectations and the syllabus. It's available on Google Classroom. You'll see it there for your perusal. But I wanted to take a few minutes to take a look over it. And for those of you who are enjoying this game at home, welcome with us here. 2020, 2021. Google Classroom enrollment key. Now, this is something, if you're here, you probably have already gotten this, but the enrollment key is listed right there at 7DWZZLI. We'll make sure we're all enrolled in that class, and you'll find this video there along with this rule. Now, this interesting piece how history can inform us. This is actually a 17th century plague mask. Plagues were actually a part of world history periodically with catastrophic results. Probably the most infamous one we're familiar with was the bubonic plague, the Black Death of 1347, that swept from Afro-Eurasia, killing in some places over half the population in some places. So we're talking about a mortality rate that has never been really exceeded by previous plagues. So just thought to give us some perspective that we're not the first generation to deal with the problem of infectious diseases. Now, the mission in this class kind of reflects this. This is something you'll see in our classroom too. Human history is a race between education and catastrophe. That's by the famous writer H.G. Wells. So our mission in class is to appreciate our unique opportunity we have in our part of the race of making future history, while developing the critical thinking tools that we'll need along the way, so we can win the race, at least for our leg of it. We want to make sure that the history that future generations will be looking at, that we've done our part, and we can be proud of how we managed our unique time in history. And of course, part of our unique time is dealing with a pandemic. And that's something we'll talk about periodically since we're in this time of pandemic, about how important it is that you engage in this class faithfully on your own. That in many cases, the rules that we have in class that will help frame our approach to history, that you have to enforce those rules yourself. Because although the material could come home, I'm not there with you. You'll have to put pressure on yourself. I'm not sure if you appreciate how important it is that when we're not in school, it's not a day off, that whatever happens, we don't get time back. And less education and less engagement is something we'll carry with us as long as we live. So we can't simply just turn off. So let's please make sure that we do that. So one of the things that's important to note, we talk about world history. World history generally is, I mean, it really isn't a class so much as it is an understanding and appreciation of the world that you guys will be contributing to. I argue there has never been a generation born into so many possibilities, yet as individuals remain so helpless. What do I mean by that, as we appreciate during the year, is that first human societies pretty much did everything they needed on their own. They produced their own or gathered their own food, they produced their own laws, that essentially they engaged in relationships that were very easy to understand as what a father is to a son, or a mother is to a daughter, and cousins, uncles, and aunts. The first human societies were very organic, but human societies have become increasingly complex. And that's probably one of the most important things we have to understand is the complexity of human societies and how they've emerged from very simple ones, and how those complex societies really require us to have a great understanding of something we'll call interdependence, and the idea of how our activities and actions impact people around us. We're not going to cover everything. There's no way you could study what billions of people on Earth for tens of thousands of years have done to create history. We're going to survey some processes. We'll look at generally the beginning of human history and how humans created the first human societies, and then skip ahead to the last 500 years when we start to see the beginning of global history with Columbus, up into our present very interdependent, very globalized society. So that's what we're looking at. Three rules, very simple. Now, the first one has a new meaning this year because it says to be present. Being present means in the classroom, but it could also mean being present at home with your studies, engaging the material. When you approach history, you have to be spiritually, intellectually, and physically ready to engage in the challenge of history. I mean, not just to know why you're doing it, but what you're supposed to do and holding yourself accountable to expectations. Whether it's online or in person, the idea of having personal goals and working to improve has never been more important, particularly your responsibility. Rather than being pushed to do it, you should be pushing yourself. Be responsible. The big issue this year is the iPad. Please make sure you have your iPad fully charged. You need to act with integrity and grace inside of class and outside of class. You need to be responsible for what you do. You need to be responsible for your behavior, your engagement. And the third part is to be curious. Yeah, I know that we have things we have to do. We will have assignments, but the idea history should be driven by curiosity. I want to know, I want to understand. Be willing to ask questions. Be willing to doubt. Test your expectations and look critically at what you come to know. And that's what we'll be talking about in class. Now, generally in class, make sure you know the Google Classroom. Your iPad will be your window into the Google Classroom. That's the main platform we'll be using. Lectures we'll do with PowerPoint. I'll probably support that with some type of screencasting. Reading assignments will be posted generally twice a week, and of course the work will be submitted on the Google Classroom. Activities will include physical or virtual discussions, and that will be part of the creative problem solving. And it's going to be harder to collaborate, but we have the technological tools to try to incorporate collaboration, and that's going to be a very important piece. We'll be writing a paper coming in January. That at least is our plan. And as we navigate these changing times and changing environments in class or in hybrid or at home, it's important you communicate anything that's a problem. I could get better at my work. Make me the teacher that your children's parents deserve someday. Make me as good as you need me to be. Grades. Learning history is more important, obviously, but the grades will measure our progress. And I'll be looking at class participation, projects, tests, and quizzes, which will be done online. I'm not a fan of extra credit, but we'll offer some types of extra credit, and we'll figure out how that could operate. But one of the keys issues is integrity. That is doing the right thing when no one's watching. It's a discipline that will last a lifetime. And when you're working inside or outside of the classroom, work with integrity. Do your own work. Put your name on things that you do. And when you need help, it's easier for me to help you before you make a mistake of cheating or something of that nature. But there's problems. Grades are only on the computer. They can be changed based on efforts that you make. After school tutoring might be more difficult, at least for the first part of the year. But again, I'll be accessible after school via email. Now, we have 4 units that we're working on in class, and the first unit is the foundations, generally looking at what are the features of human society and religions and how humans work together to create the first states, the first religions, and the first we might call abstract identities, like being an American, for example, or being a Sumerian, or being part of a group larger than a family. That's the beginning of history. Then we'll be looking at how world history began with the forces of trade networks, and the communication of trade, and how the old world, so-called old world and new world, became merged into a single world. Then we'll look at how between 1750 and 1914, how states in the West, particularly Europe and America, and added to Japan, became dominators of the world. And of course, that domination would eventually collapse under the forces of world wars. And then we will be looking at modern global society since 1914. And that will be our last issue. Textbook is going to be online. Other sources will be found on the Google Classroom. All right, so if you have any questions, please, you could email me, or if we're in the classroom, please ask. But understand the expectations. There's reasons for everything that we do in here. I'm not a hard person to reach or to ask questions about. The big issue here is that we leave here with more history and a foundation that can help us become lifetime learners of history, and where we can engage more in a world that's becoming increasingly global just by the nature of history. All right, thank you.